want to thank the nominees and their families for their service to our country, previous service, continuing service. I think I've enjoyed meeting with both of you, and I look forward to confirming you. And we need senior leadership, Senate-confirmed leadership in the Pentagon. I think it's very important. So let me start with a question that's on a region of the world that I'm sure you're not going to be surprised given our previous discussions I want to talk about, and that's the Arctic. You know, America is an Arctic nation because of Alaska, and I have some handouts. I can provide them to my colleagues as well, but I think they were provided to you. Hopefully they were. There's a very significant Russian buildup in the Arctic. You take a look at the handouts. Were you provided handouts? Why don't you, the staff, can take a look at these. Got it too. Thanks. And almost daily, if you look at the other handout, there are articles literally almost daily about what's happening in the Arctic in terms of a Russia-China buildup, great power rivalry, just in the last couple days, in addition to what you have there as a handout. An article in the Washington Post said, "Forget Greenland, a far more dangerous game is being played in the Arctic." An article in the National Interest, all within the last week. What does China want with the Arctic, given its new strategy? And then on the Hill newspaper just said an article that started by saying the next Cold War with Russia may be a literal vice metaphorical one. So before we dismiss President Trump's interest in Greenland, we should consider that our great power rivals, China and Russia, aggressively seek Arctic influence. This is daily. Ambassador Barrett, you have extensive experience in the Arctic, particularly given your tenure as ambassador to Finland. Given that the National Defense Strategy focuses on great power competition, Secretary Pompeo recently gave a very, what I thought, well thought out speech on the Arctic. I'd like to get your views on what we should be doing there to protect our national interests, and Secretary McCarthy, I'd like yours as well.
Senator, Mercator didn't do us any favors by flattening the globe. People lose track of how small the northern hemisphere is and how close those properties are, and how close Alaska is to going over the top into the Siberian area. That is now both available in shipping as well as the persistent space access to those areas. And that is an area where threats would potentially derive.
Let me just say real quick, I think, you know, I mentioned the Secretary of State. This committee is certainly starting to raise awareness on this. I do think the biggest agency in Washington that hasn't gotten the message on our strategic competition in the Arctic is the Pentagon. Some are getting it. The big blob of a bureaucracy there isn't yet. So can I get both of your commitments to come to Alaska with me, see the Arctic firsthand in America, and get your commitment to work with me in this committee, which is very interested, by the way, in a bipartisan way on these issues, to work with this committee to make sure we are protecting America's strategic interests in this next great power rivalry arena? Ambassador, can I get your commitment on that?
Yes, sir. Mr.
Secretary. Senator Duckworth raised a very good question with regard to logistics in the Asia-Pacific. Ambassador Barrett, the Air Force is looking to make its OCONUS decisions here on basing of the KC-46. Alaska is going to have over 100 fifth-generation fighters, F-35s, F-22s, within the next couple years. No place on the planet Earth will have that many combat-coded fifth-gen fighters. When Secretary Esper went through his confirmation hearing, he mentioned that pairing 100 fifth-gen fighters with KC-46s that can reach 3 combatant commands areas within hours would give the United States extreme strategic reach. Will you commit to working with me on that OCONUS decision, which again, this committee has laid out guidelines for the Air Force in terms of its OCONUS basing at KC-46?
Absolutely, Senator.
Let me ask a final question. It relates to readiness. Mr. Secretary, The chairman, to his credit, has raised this readiness issue quite a lot in the committee. I chair the readiness subcommittee. From 2010 to 2015, the Department of Defense budget was cut by 25%. My first 3 months in the Senate in 2015, the Obama administration was still cutting 50,000 additional active duty Army troops, which in retrospect looks like a strategically idiotic decision, but they did it anyways. Have you read this book, This Kind of War by T.R. Fehrenbach, which the Army and Marine Corps gives to all infantry officers?
Yes, sir, twice.
Twice, good. I appreciate that. Can you talk a little bit about readiness and Task Force Smith and what happened in America when in 1945 we had the most feared military in the history of the world, and 5 years later we couldn't stop a third world peasant army from invading the South?
Readiness is a constant state of, I'm sorry, sir? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Senator.
Try to expedite your answer as quickly as you can.
Yes, sir. Senator, readiness is a constant state of vigilance. You can't ever take your foot off the gas. Every day we have to get as many repetitions as we can. Physically, individual training, collective training, it's something that is one of the greatest deterrents we have in the military, is having as many formations at the highest levels of readiness capable to meet national objectives.